What if staying calm in the face of hate made you the most powerful kid in school? They bullied him for being the quiet new kid until he dropped one of them without breaking a sweat and walked away like nothing happened. Jalen Brooks stared out to the passenger window as the family's old silver Honda turned off into State 74 and rolled past the "Welcome to Plainfield" sign. His mom tapped the steering wheel like she was trying to keep beat with a song that wasn't playing. Outside, long rows of tan brick homes stretched into the distance, every lawn freshly cut, every mailbox neatly painted. It was the kind of place where people waved at each other for no reason. Jalen wasn't in the mood to wave. "You okay?" his mom asked, glancing over quickly before fixing her eyes back on the road. He gave a shrug. "Yeah, you're gonna do fine. I've got a good feeling about this place," she said, forcing a smile. She was trying to sound hopeful. She always did after a move. This was their third one in 4 years. Her promotion meant better pay, better hours, and what she called a shot at stability. But to Jalen, it just meant another goodbye to everything familiar. He'd left his best friend back in Fort Wayne. He left his favorite gym, the one with the worn mats and the old punching bags that smelled like sweat and bleach. Worst of all, he had to start over again. New school, new faces, new people trying to figure him out. Monroe Middle School came into view before he was ready for it. A squat modern building surrounded by oak trees and a parking lot that wrapped around the front like a lazy river. Kids stood near the entrance in loose clusters, backpacks slung low, laughter spilling out across the sidewalk. Jalen's stomach tensed up. The butterflies weren't from fear. He just didn't feel like being looked at. He hated that part, being the new kid, everyone sizing you up, trying to figure out your angle. Some would be curious, others would be suspicious, but there were always a few who just didn't like someone new, especially when they looked different. His mom pulled into a parking space and turned off the ignition. She looked over at him, her expression softening. "Look, I know it's hard, but you know who you are, Jay. Don't let anyone take that from you." Jalen nodded quietly, unbuckling his seatbelt. "And if anybody gives you a hard time," she added, "you know what to do." He smirked. "You mean breathe deep and stay calm?" "Exactly," she smiled, proud. "That's what your uncle always says, right?" Jalen opened the door and stepped out. He had his uncle's words burned into the back of his mind. Control is everything. Power doesn't come from punches. It comes from knowing when not to throw one. He'd trained long enough to understand that now. As they walked toward the school entrance, he kept his eyes low. The sound of sneakers scuffing against pavement, backpacks zipping open, and the low thrum of early morning chatter all blurred together. But he caught it, that slight pause in conversation when he passed. He could feel it, that quiet moment where people noticed him and didn't know what to make of him. In homeroom, the teacher, a woman named Miss Driscoll with wire frame glasses and a voice like morning radio, introduced him without much fanfare. "We've got a new student joining us today," she said, motioning toward him. "Jalen Brooks from Fort Wayne. Make him feel welcome." A few glances, one nod. That was it. He sat down in the back row and tried to disappear. But it's never that easy. By third period, Jalen had already picked up on the school's rhythm. Who walked the halls with confidence, who stayed out of the way, who always had something to say. He noticed a boy with a buzz cut and a loud laugh who seemed to hold court in the cafeteria. Another kid, tall, sharp cheekbones, twitchy, watched everything like a hawk. And a third, smaller one with braces who tagged along and laughed too hard at everything they said. They hadn't said anything to Jalen yet, but they didn't have to. He recognized the energy. He'd seen it before. The kind that hovered just outside your bubble, waiting to push past it. Jalen kept his posture relaxed, his hands still. He watched them watching him but never stared back long enough to invite anything. He didn't need trouble, but trouble had a way of finding people like him. But Jalen wasn't the only one paying attention, and the first crack in the surface was about to show. Lunch at Monroe Middle didn't come with much choice. Just a few loud tables, sticky floors, and pizza slices that looked like they'd been microwaved into submission. Jalen carried his tray past the full tables without slowing down, heading for the far corner near the windows where no one was sitting. He didn't mind. He actually preferred eating alone. Less talking, more thinking. And right now he had a lot to think about. He was mid-bite into something that claimed to be lasagna when a shadow cut across his tray. "You knew." Jalen looked up. A boy with tight curls and a red hoodie stood across from him. Not aggressive, just curious. "Yeah," Jalen answered, cool. "I'm Dev. You don't got to sit here alone, man. Come sit with us next time." Jalen nodded once. He appreciated it, but that wasn't his style. Dev gave a half smile and walked off back to his table near the center of the cafeteria. It was a small moment, but one Jalen would remember. A few minutes later, a voice from the left caught his attention. Louder, not friendly. "Yo, is that your mom's lunch?" Jalen turned slowly. 3 boys were standing just a few feet away, the tall one with the sharp cheekbones. He spoke first. His name was Colby. Jalen had already heard teachers say it during roll call. Next to him was the kid with the buzz cut, Austin, and behind them, trailing a step behind, the smaller one, Trent. Jalen didn't answer. Colby tilted his head like he was surprised. "Oh, he doesn't talk." Austin snorted. "Maybe he doesn't speak English." That made Trent laugh way too loud. Jalen looked back down at his tray. He wasn't about to give them the reaction they wanted. That only ever made it worse. His uncle taught him that when he was 9, bullies feed on your energy. Stay steady, and they don't know what to do with you. But not reacting didn't make them stop. Colby leaned closer. "What's in the bag, bro? Karate belt? You gonna do some flips or something?" Jalen didn't move. "I'm eating." "Say what?" Austin said, stepping in. "Now you say something." "I said I'm eating," Jalen repeated, his voice even. For a second there was silence. Then Austin slapped the milk carton off Jalen's tray, and it landed sideways on the floor, milk spilling in a pale stream. Jalen blinked once. That was the moment. He could feel it in his chest, tight, warm, that instinct to do something. But he held it right there in the middle of his ribs. Then Dev showed up. "Hey, back off," Dev said, stepping between them. Colby rolled his eyes. "Relax, man. We're just saying hi to the new kid." "That's not what it looked like." Austin grinned. "You gonna cry for him now?" Trent laughed again, but his laugh sounded more unsure this time. Miss Garvey, one of the lunch aides, spotted the milk on the floor and came over. "What happened?" "Just spilled," Colby said, already stepping back. "No big deal." They scattered before she could ask more questions, leaving Dev and Jalen behind. Dev bent down, grabbed a few napkins from Jalen's tray, and started cleaning up the mess. "You good?" Jalen gave a small nod. Dev didn't push. "They think they're funny. You just got to keep your space." Jalen looked at him. "They won't stop." Dev shrugged. "Probably not. They don't have anything better to do." Jalen knew that already. He'd dealt with boys like them before. Not always the same faces, but the same attitude. The same little smirks. Like they knew something about you just by looking at you. Like they had already decided you didn't belong. But he also knew something else. They didn't know him, not really. But it wouldn't take long before they decided to push further. And this time, someone else would get caught in the middle. By the end of Jalen's first week, the novelty of being the new kid wore off. What didn't fade was the attention from Colby, Austin, and Trent. Every day brought something new. Shoulder bumps in the hallway, comments whispered just loud enough to hear, pencils knocked off his desk. When the teacher wasn't looking, they didn't do it to hurt him. Not physically. Not yet. That wasn't the point. They wanted to get inside his head. And for the most part, it didn't work. Jalen stayed steady, quiet, focused. But the thing about bullies, when they don't get a reaction, they don't back off. They just try harder. It was Tuesday afternoon, and gym class meant dodgeball. Coach Winfrey's favorite way to pretend chaos was cardio. Jalen changed in the corner of the locker room like he always did, back turned, quick and efficient. He could feel them watching him, whispering. He didn't have to hear the words to know what they were saying. It was the same look he'd seen back in Fort Wayne, back in Toledo, back in Cincinnati. On the court, he played clean. Not too hard, not too soft. Aiming low, not showing off. But when he knocked Austin out with a clean shot to the shins, that's when it shifted. Later in the locker room, as kids filed out and Coach Winfrey yelled something about deodorant, Jalen heard the shuffle of feet behind him. "You think you're slick out there?" Austin's voice. Jalen kept tying his shoe. Colby added, "Kid thinks he's special, 'cause he can throw a ball." Jalen stood up, slow and measured. "It's a game." Trent laughed too loud again. "Nah, you made Austin look dumb." "I didn't make anyone look dumb," Jalen said. "He just got hit." There was a beat of silence. Austin's jaw tightened, but Coach's voice echoed again down the hallway. The moment broke. They left, shoving past him. But Jalen knew this wasn't over. He felt it in the silence between their words. That Friday it boiled over. It started on the back field behind the school, the one with the old soccer goals and broken bleachers. Kids liked to hang there after last bell, waiting on rides or wasting time. Jalen usually walked straight home. That day he took the longer route. He shouldn't have. He saw them first, the three of them standing near the fence. But what stopped him wasn't their presence. It was who was with them. Dev, backpack still on, hands at his sides, looking annoyed but not afraid. Jalen slowed his walk. He caught just enough of the exchange to know what was happening. Colby, "You always playing bodyguard for him?" Dev, "You always looking for somebody to mess with?" Austin, "You should watch who you're defending." Dev, "Or what? You're gonna spill more milk." They laughed, but it was sharp, not funny. Jalen moved in closer. His footsteps were steady, quiet. He stopped a few feet away and Dev saw him first. "Hey!" Dev called over his shoulder, not looking away from the others. Jalen didn't answer. He looked at each of them. Colby, Austin, Trent. They all turned. "Well, look who showed up," Colby said, smiling like it was a joke. "You bring backup now?" Jalen stepped next to Dev. "You done talking?" Colby blinked. "What?" I said, "Are you done?" Austin smirked. "Nah, we just getting started." It happened fast. Austin shoved Dev. Not hard, just enough to cross the line. Dev stumbled but didn't fall. Jalen's hand went out instinctively, steadying him. Then Jalen looked at Austin. Really looked at him. Calm. Quiet. Not angry. "Don't do that again." Austin puffed up, taking a step forward. "Or what? You gonna cry?" Jalen didn't move. "I'm serious," he said, his voice even. Colby raised an eyebrow. "Yo, this kid really thinks..." Jalen didn't wait. It wasn't a punch. It wasn't a wild swing. He stepped forward, grabbed Austin's wrist mid-motion before the boy could shove again, and twisted just enough to control the movement. Then, with a short sweep of his foot, Austin was on the ground. Not hard, not hurt, but down. Colby and Trent stared. Austin blinked up at the sky, stunned. Jalen didn't gloat, didn't smile. He just stood there, hand relaxed by his side. "You good?" he asked Dev. Dev nodded, stunned silent. Jalen turned and walked away. But the real fallout wasn't in that moment. It came with the silence that followed him all the way down the sidewalk. Jalen didn't say a word the entire walk home. He didn't need to. His body still felt tight from the tension. Not from the brief move he'd made, but from everything wrapped around it. Being watched, being tested, and knowing exactly when to pull back. That was something his uncle had drilled into him for years. Never act out of anger. Stay centered. Always. When he reached his street, the calm of suburban Plainfield felt off. Too quiet. The kind of silence that meant someone somewhere was already telling a story. And Jalen's name was in it. His mom was in the kitchen, still in her scrubs, stirring a pot of something warm and heavy with spice. "You're late," she said gently. Jalen kicked off his shoes. "I stopped with a friend." She looked over her shoulder. "Everything good?" He paused. "Yeah." Her eyes narrowed just a little, the way they did when she wasn't fully convinced. But she didn't press. She never did right away. She gave him room. Always. The next day, school didn't feel the same. Jalen stepped through the doors and felt something shift. Not loud, not obvious, but there. A pause when he walked into first period. A glance from across the hall. Not fear, just attention. Colby, Austin, and Trent weren't at their usual table during lunch. Dev found him again, sliding into the seat across from him like nothing had happened. "So, Dev said, opening his juice. "You trained or something?" Jalen looked up. "Yeah." "For how long?" 8 years. My uncle taught me." Dev blinked. "You serious?" Jalen just nodded. "Okay. Yeah, that explains a lot," Dev said, almost laughing. "You dropped him like a sack of bricks." Jalen shook his head. "Didn't drop him. Just redirected." "That's what you call that?" Dev grinned. "Man, you might be the calmest dude I ever met." Jalen shrugged. "Fighting isn't the hard part. Not reacting is." Dev raised his eyebrows. "Well, that reaction saved my butt." Jalen looked at him, serious. "They'll probably come back harder." Dev leaned in. "Then they're dumber than they look." Word traveled fast. By the next day, the story had morphed. Some said Jalen body slammed Austin. Others said he flipped him through the air like in a movie. A few even claimed he put Colby in a chokehold, which didn't happen at all. Jalen didn't correct anyone. He didn't care about the exaggerations. But the attention, that was new. And it made him uncomfortable. What surprised him most wasn't the way students looked at him. It was how quiet Colby and his crew got. No jokes. No comments. They walked past him now like he wasn't even there. But that wasn't peace. That was pressure building. Miss Driscoll pulled him aside after class 2 days later. "I heard there was an incident last week." Jalen kept his expression still. "In the yard?" "Yes," she said, tilting her head. "You okay?" "I didn't throw a punch," he said. She studied him for a moment. "I know. That's what everyone says." He stayed quiet. "Just be careful," she added. "Sometimes when things go quiet, it doesn't mean they're over." Jalen understood. He appreciated that she didn't lecture him. But he also knew she was right. At gym the following week, Coach Winfrey pulled him aside too. "Your name came across my desk," he said, arms folded. Jalen didn't respond. "Couple teachers think maybe you should talk to someone. Counselor. Just to check in." "I'm fine." "You sure?" Jalen nodded. Coach studied him for a moment, then said, "Word of advice. Strong people don't need to prove it." Jalen didn't reply, but the words stuck. They weren't new. His uncle had said something just like that. Still, hearing it here from someone who didn't know him, it hit different. Jalen thought maybe things would calm down. But power doesn't vanish. It shifts. And just because Colby and the others weren't pushing him around anymore didn't mean they'd let go. But the next move wouldn't come from them. And Jalen wasn't the only one feeling the weight of what happened. The Monday after everything happened, something changed at Monroe Middle School. But it wasn't in the hallways or the classrooms. It was in the way people acted around each other. The boys who used to crack jokes at others' expense suddenly kept their voices down. Girls who had never spoken to Jalen before now gave him curious, sometimes admiring looks. Even teachers, without saying a word, seemed more aware when he entered a room. But Jalen didn't want any of it. He still sat alone at lunch, still kept his answers short in class. He didn't want to be the kid everyone whispered about. All he'd done was stop a shove. But apparently that was all it took to change the way people saw you. Dev noticed too. He slid into the seat across from Jalen during lunch again, but this time with a smirk. "You're like a myth now," he said, tossing his banana on the table. "Did you know somebody said you broke Austin's wrist?" Jalen raised an eyebrow. "His wrist's fine." "Yeah, I know that. You know that. But stories spread fast when people are bored." Jalen didn't respond right away. He pushed his tray back a little, appetite gone. "I didn't do it for attention." Dev leaned back. "You think I don't know that?" Jalen looked out over the cafeteria. A few kids were watching them. One of them was Trent. His usual goofy confidence noticeably dulled. When their eyes met, Trent looked away. Jalen's voice dropped. "They're not done." Dev followed his gaze. "Colby? All of them? They're waiting. For what? For something they can twist." The next day Jalen found a drawing stuffed into his locker. A sloppy sketch of a boy kicking another in the head with "Judo Jalen" written underneath in thick black ink. It wasn't much. Not violent. Not direct. But it meant something. Jalen crumpled it up and kept walking. In PE, Austin stayed quiet. Colby didn't even show up. But it was Trent who surprised Jalen. After class, Trent hovered awkwardly near the gym doors. When most of the students had cleared out, he walked up slowly. Jalen stiffened but didn't move. "Look," Trent said, his voice low, almost embarrassed. "I didn't mean to, be part of all that." Jalen stared at him, waiting. I laughed and all, but I didn't think it'd go that far. Austin's the one who always pushes stuff. I just went along with it." Jalen let the silence stretch. "You're not saying anything," Trent muttered, shifting on his feet. Jalen finally spoke. "You don't get points for regret after someone else gets hurt." Trent nodded slowly, looking down. "Yeah, I figured." He walked away without saying anything else. Later that afternoon, Miss Garvey, the lunch aide, pulled Jalen aside near the school library. "I saw what happened last week. I didn't say anything sooner because I wanted to be sure," she said. Jalen frowned. "Sure of what?" "That you weren't going to let it change you." He tilted his head slightly. She smiled. "A lot of kids, after something like that, They walk around like they've got something to prove. You haven't. That says something. Jalen didn't know how to respond, so he just nodded. But it sat with him, the idea that not reacting could be just as powerful as defending yourself. That sometimes the loudest message came in silence. That night after dinner, his mom leaned against the kitchen counter, scrolling through something on her phone. "You okay at school?" she asked, not looking up. Jalen hesitated. "I think so." She set the phone down. "That's not a yes." "I stopped something," he said. She waited. "Someone got shoved. I stepped in." Her face didn't change, but her eyes sharpened. "Did you hurt anyone?" "No. I controlled it, just like Uncle taught me." She exhaled through her nose. "Good. Because you know people see what they want. Doesn't matter what really happened." "I know." She walked over, placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'm proud of you, but you gotta be careful, Jay. It's not just about strength. It's about what happens after people see it." But Jalen wasn't finished, because something deeper had started to shift at Monroe, and soon it would reach more than just him. It was the second Wednesday of the month, which meant advisory period, 35 minutes of loosely guided conversation that usually went nowhere. But this time, Ms. Keene, the school counselor, stepped in with a clipboard in hand and that quiet kind of authority that made even the louder kids sit straighter. "Today we're doing something different," she said, smiling faintly. "You'll each get a card with a question. Nothing too deep. You can pass if you want, but I hope you won't." Most of the class groaned softly. A few rolled their eyes. Jalen didn't react. He sat in the back as always, leaning just enough into his seat to disappear. Cards were handed out, desks shifted, and the circle slowly formed. Miss Keene sat in a chair at the front, giving them space without leaving them entirely alone. Jalen flipped his card over and read the question. "What's something people assume about you that isn't true?" He stared at the words for a few seconds, then placed the card face down on the desk again. Kids around the room started going through theirs, some joking, some serious. One girl talked about how everyone thought she was rich because she wore nice shoes, but really her mom worked double shifts and they shared a one-bedroom apartment. A boy said people thought he was dumb because he stuttered when he got nervous. Another kid admitted he always acted like a clown because it was easier than saying he didn't want to go home. It wasn't perfect. Some of the answers were still jokes. But something about the room had changed. Miss Keene noticed too. She glanced at Jalen. "Would you like to share?" He paused, then spoke. "People think I'm angry because I'm quiet." A few heads turned. "I'm not," he said. "I just think before I talk." He didn't say more. Didn't need to. It was enough. More than he'd said in a room full of people all week. After class, Ms. Keene caught up with him just outside the door. "Jalen, can I talk to you for a minute?" He nodded. They stepped aside near the lockers. "I heard what happened behind the field," she said, voice gentle. "I know the teachers tried to handle it quietly, but students talk." Jalen stayed quiet. "I'm not here to scold you," she continued. "Actually, I think you handled it better than most adults would have." Jalen glanced at her. "Then why does it feel like I did something wrong?" "Because people aren't used to seeing calm and control from someone they've already misunderstood." He looked down at the floor. Miss Keene lowered her voice. "This school's been needing a wake-up call. You may not realize it, but you gave it one. Not because of what you did to Austin, but because you didn't let it change you afterward." Jalen's jaw tensed. "They still think I'm dangerous." She didn't deny it. "Maybe some do, but others are learning something about respect." about paying attention before they speak. He said nothing for a few seconds. Then, "It shouldn't take that." "No," she said softly. "But sometimes it does." He nodded once, started to walk away. "You ever need to talk?" she called gently after him. "My door's open." He didn't turn around, but he gave the smallest wave over his shoulder. That night, he found himself thinking about what she'd said, about how quickly people judge, how slowly they learn. He thought about Dev, about Miss Garvey, about even Trent, how guilt was a strange thing, and how it looked different on every face. He sat at his desk with a pencil in hand, his math book open but untouched. Instead, he flipped to the back page and began to write something. Not a story, not a journal entry, just thoughts, scattered words that made sense only to him. He didn't know it yet, but that quiet act of writing would lead to something far bigger than any takedown ever could. 2 weeks passed. Nothing blew up. No fights. No outbursts. No revenge. And yet something was clearly different at Monroe Middle School. Jalen noticed it in the small things. A kid dropped his notebook in the hallway. Someone stopped to help pick it up. 2 sixth graders arguing over a basketball. It didn't end with shoving this time. Even in the cafeteria, the air felt less tense. Not friendly, just less wired. He hadn't done much. Not really. But sometimes one act, one calm refusal to be pushed, makes people look around and ask themselves why they follow certain rules that were never really rules at all. What surprised Jalen most was who approached him next. It was during science class. The one with the substitute who never really paid attention. They were doing a group project, build a tower using straws and masking tape. Jalen had just finished sketching an idea when a shadow appeared beside him. "Hey," Colby said, almost under his breath. Jalen looked up, eyes guarded. Colby didn't have the usual edge in his voice. He didn't look smug. If anything, he looked tired. I'm not good at this," Colby said, motioning vaguely toward the half-crushed pile of straws at his own table. Jalen didn't say anything, just kept looking at him. Colby shifted awkwardly. "You know, people think I'm some kind of leader or whatever. I just say stuff and people laugh. Doesn't mean I know what I'm doing." Jalen blinked slowly. "You need help with a straw tower?" Colby cracked a half-smile. "Yeah, I guess I do." Jalen didn't nod, didn't smile, but he did stand up and follow Colby back to his table. The conversation didn't go further than that, but the moment hung there, quiet, strange, almost honest, and that was enough for now. Later that day during dismissal, Ms. Keene pulled Jalen aside again, this time in the front office. "I wanted you to see something," she said, holding up a printed flyer. At the top, bold letters read Student Voice Circle. Real talk, real change. Jalen raised an eyebrow. "We're starting with 12 kids. Diverse mix, some from each grade. I want to build something that lasts longer than hallway gossip." Jalen looked at her, skeptical. "And you want me in it?" "No. I want you to help lead it." He froze. "I've been watching," she said. "Not just how you handled Austin, but how you didn't run from what came after. That kind of presence matters." Jalen sat down slowly in the office chair. "I'm not really a leader." Miss Keene tilted her head. "You don't have to be loud to lead." He thought about that, thought about how people had watched him since the fight. Some with respect, some with confusion, some with resentment. He didn't want attention. But if that attention could be used for something real, maybe it was worth it. "I'll try," he said. She smiled. "That's all I'm asking." The first meeting happened the next week in the library after school. 12 students, 2 teachers, and no agenda except to talk. Not just about bullying, but about how people see each other, how labels stick, how silence sometimes causes more damage than words. Jalen didn't say much during that first meeting,